get started. Very good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to our virtual Second Nature Software Stormwater Compliance for Florida. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about digital performance-based approaches to stormwater management and compliance. I'm Martinette Botha. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Second Nature Software, and I'm going to be helping to facilitate our conference today. And with that, I am very excited to introduce our presenters. Seth Brown is the Principal and Founder of Storm and Stream Solutions and the Executive Director of the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. He's going to be our keynote speaker today. Seth is a registered professional engineer and has 25 years in the stormwater sector. He also holds a PhD in civil engineering from George Mason University. Francis Kelly is Manager of Global Partner Program at ESRI, focused on state and local government, and he's going to talk with us today about ESRI licenses and implementation. Francis has been with ESRI for about 4 years now and actually comes from a former partner of ESRI and has formerly sat on ESRI's Partner Advisory Council. Michelle Tanner is Senior Scientist and Customer Success Lead at Second Nature, and she's going to be running through a software demo for us today. She uses her expertise in GIS and applied science to help customers integrate software, mobile applications, and GIS analysis into their everyday workflows. She also leads the Second Nature Virtual Classroom Customer Training Program and has also played an important role in developing models that can be used for ongoing tracking of green infrastructure. And Jason Yoho is Second Nature's Chief Commercial Officer and is responsible for customer relationships at Second Nature. Jason has spent 20 years in Silicon Valley helping customers understand how they can benefit from the cloud. He will give us an overview of Second Nature and how to get started with a digital performance-based approach to stormwater management and compliance, and how this innovative approach unlocks the multi-benefits associated with investment in stormwater management and compliance practices. Now, just for a couple of housekeeping items, I'd like to invite anyone to ask questions you might have in the chat window at any point during the conference. We will either answer the questions in chat or we'll address them at the end of the conference. We have about 10 minutes for a Q&A session at the end. So we'll try to get to everyone's questions, but if we don't, we will follow up with you offline as well. You can reach out to us directly by email. I'll drop all the presenters' email addresses into the chat box. So feel free to reach out to us directly. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Seth. Thank you, Seth.
All right. Thanks, Martinette. Thanks for everybody joining us today. I'm going to get things started just kind of looking at some big picture thoughts. And actually, this week is an exciting week, and I'll talk about why. But this is a great time to be talking about infrastructure, generally speaking, but specifically stormwater is a really, really big week. So as you heard, I'm from I represent the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. I'm the executive director. I'm going to talk a little bit about NAMSA. That's how we refer to it. And again, I'm going to talk about kind of how the sector is maturing overall and how that ties into kind of the topic today, I think, which is looking at data issues. Next slide, please. So yeah, I grew up in a big Catholic family. Again, maybe that's a redundant thing. I don't know. Say big and Catholic, but and I was not only the youngest of a big Catholic family, but I was the youngest cousin of all my cousins. So I was always, you go to Thanksgiving, and there's always the kids table and then the adults table and all the. I was actually the youngest of all the kids tables. It was the worst. I was always trying to graduate up to the adults table because that's where all the really that's where all the interesting things were being talked about. You wanted to be an adult and have the nice silverware and all that stuff rather than the plastic, recanting stuff. So the point here is that we in the stormwater sector, I think we've been at the little kids table for a long time. And now it's time for us to, if you give me one click, I know I don't, this is my major animation in the whole presentation. Thanks, Martinette. We are now, everyone else is at that big kids table. Now it's our turn to go to that table. And I'm gonna try to make the case that that's happening now and it should happen more. And that's really a fundamental thing of what NAMSA is trying to get done. And part of this is data. So that's the whole point here. Next slide, please. So another way to frame this is which is a little bit more technical and on topic, is looking at how water quality issues have changed over time. So the information on this slide has it's taken from an opinion piece from a person named William Ruckelshaus, which he actually was one of the authors of the Clean Water Act way back in the day. And he was the first EPA administrator, and he was actually the only person to hold that position twice. He came back in the early 80s after there were some problems there, and he came in to kind of restabilize the agency, and he brought a lot of credibility back. The point is that he wrote this piece, which is 2010, so it's a little bit dated, but I think it's very much still poignant here. And he said, you know, the question was, how have things changed since they started writing the Clean Water Act? How have the water quality issues changed overall? And his point was back in 1970 when they first started putting the elements of the Clean Water Act together, because it was one of the largest pieces of legislation that's ever been put together. Took a lot of time, but there's a lot of bipartisan consensus on this. All the things that you don't see today, but we hope to get back to. But anyway, back then they started, took some time to put this together, and they said back then the biggest problem was, point source, traditional point source pollution, which 85%, that blue part of that pie chart, was stuff like wastewater effluent, industrial effluent. Our rivers were on fire, smack yourself in the forehead problems that were so obvious we need to do something about it. So if you can give me one click, please, Martinet. And you fast forward 40 years, and his point was, yeah, that pie chart is, that pie chart is about how much pollution, how much impairment in our water quality, in our waters at any given time. Clearly, that whole pie chart has shrunk. We've got less pollution, which is great. Clean Water Act's been successful, but there's been so much focus on that blue part of that traditional point source. And I know that folks who regulate stormwater will say, well, yes, stormwater is a point source. It is regulatorily, I agree. Back in 1970, it wasn't part of that. So that's part of that non-point source, which makes up 85% of the total impairments today. And that's his point, is that the water quality issue of today and the future is addressing stuff like urban stormwater, ag runoff. So again, I'm trying to make the point here that we are, this is the issue of the day, and so we should step up to the plate on that, and we are in many ways. Okay, I just want to go over NAMSA over a couple of slides. If you can go to 2 slides forward, thank you very much. So who is NAMSA, or what is NAMSA? It's this is a nonprofit organization that has a national coverage, and it's a coalition of groups. It's not member-based, not individual members. It's organizations are members. So I just want to make sure that's clear. That's why it's called an alliance, not an association. We've got 3 different member types. Most of our members, kind of the core of our members, are state-level organizations that focus on MS4 issues. So our founding members, some of our founding members included the Minnesota City Stormwater Coalition that represents MS4s in Minnesota, California Stormwater Quality Association, which obviously does the same thing in California, and so that's the core, and I'll talk about who's involved right now. We've changed our bylaws to allow individual MS4s, because some individual MS4s are actually larger than some states population-wise. So we wanted to accommodate that, and we also have affiliate members, which are anybody else out there in the world that has touches the stormwater sector, the MS4 sector in any way, shape, or form. So if you want to go to the next one, please, Martinet. Thank you. So why we formed, it's because there's, like our infrastructure itself, it's kind of all over the place. We're disaggregated, we're decentralized. So it's hard to have a unified voice, and we're younger. We're a more nascent infrastructure sector type. So we haven't been unified. So we wanted to provide a unified voice for this sector more so. That doesn't mean that everyone agrees on all things, but we wanted to try to, where we can agree, we want to talk with one voice as much as possible. We also wanted to be at the table in a proactive way, especially in policy issues. In the past, there's been a lot of reaction, and you need to be reactive on policy because things come up and you have to react. But you can react in a constructive way, or you can just kind of be disorganized. We want to be organized. We want to be reactive in a constructive way, and we want to be at the table pushing the policies in a positive way. So that's another thing. again, because we're disaggregated and there's state-driven programs, we want, they're all over the place. We want to connect and unite these programs across the country as much as possible, peer-to-peer learning, that kind of thing. And we also want to focus on things like raising the public image and the awareness of stormwater, looking at it as a resource and investments that in stormwater management that are of value, not a burden. So that's another existential thing. Next slide, please. So our vision is pretty straightforward. Our vision is like a lot of other groups. We want to provide clean water. Next slide, please, Martin. I'm sorry. I know there's a delay sometimes. Thank you. We want to provide clean water for the nation. The way that we can meet that vision is through 3 different principles, which is providing efficient, effective programs, and then we want to base our decisions on science as well. So we want to have information that are driving what we're doing. And to get all that done, we've got 4 different action areas. The first is, again, we're trying to serve the MS4 sector as much as possible. So sector support and information, and this is a lot of what we're talking about here, ties in with that. So we want to support MS4s, meet them where they are. And that's important. Nowhere in here do you see conference. We're never going to have a conference. That's okay. There's enough conferences. We want to help the state and other types of conferences, local conferences or whatever it is. We want to help them at the level. So we want to meet MS4s where they are to provide support. We also want to focus on education for public officials as well as the public, and then part of that is communication and messaging and just raising awareness on stormwater issues, which is a challenge, but it's part of almost every MS4 program, clearly. And a lot of that can be done through changes in policy and advocacy, and that's something we've been focused on quite a bit. And I'll talk about some of these issues. I could talk about a lot about each one of these. We don't have time for that, but I will highlight a couple of things. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview of where we are right now, this map shows all the states in blue are places where we have a state organization that represents 5 or more MS4s. So we've got 23 states that are part of the membership right now. The states that are in green are ones that are moving forward towards that joining. They're considering joining. And then states, including Florida, are places that we've reached out to and had some conversations about potentially joining, but that has not happened yet. So we hope to have 25 states in the near future, 23 plus the 2 green ones that we've been talking to. So half the country is pretty good. And you can see we've got all the affiliate members listed there as well. And they're lawyers and technologists and consultants and all sorts of folks that and other nonprofits as well too. So just that's the flavor of who's part of our organization. And if you can go to the next slide, please, you can see the leadership of who's at the helm. You can see I'm the executive director there. As far as our volunteer leadership, California Stormwater Quality Association's former chair is the current chair for NAMSA, which is Scott Taylor. Minnesota City Stormwater Coalition head is Randy Neprash, and he's our vice chair, and Jennifer Watson, who is with the Tennessee Stormwater Association. She is the treasurer right now. So again, just to give you an understanding of who's leading this and how's it being moved forward. That's the deal. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of things that we can highlight. One thing I wanted to highlight right now is that we have formed a couple of centers of excellence. Because we're not individual driven, we don't have committees. So we're, and again, we're only 2 years old. I should have mentioned that. We were formed in 2018. We were established in 2016. We got our IRS approval as a 501c3 in 2018. So we're still only 2-3 years old. So we're still in growth mode. And we're instead of having committees, we've got these centers of excellence that we're starting to form, one of which is centered around a new approach called the community-based public-private partnership program, and we've got water, energy, and economic resilience, because we think about investments in stormwater or any kind of infrastructure. There's almost always a nexus to other types of areas, such as social, economic, energy, the water energy nexus, all that stuff. So we're recognizing that that's the case, and we're harnessing it. The point here is that this is a new approach to get more work done more efficiently. There's a lot more to be said about that, and love for you to go to the link that's listed there. You can learn more about that there. But I did want to mention here, because we are in the process of working with communities across the country to provide free technical assistance on on this approach. so that communities can learn more about it and see how they can apply and use this for themselves. This is being applied in places from Chesapeake Bay to the Delaware River Basin up into the Great Lakes area and down into California as well. So this is being applied right now. We're just trying to promote this in the future as well. So you can get some more information and apply for this technical support if you want to by going to that URL. And that information will be provided in the slide deck that's going to be provided to you. So what's the value in being part of NAMSA? Just being part of the conversation. I could go through a lot of this stuff, but the big thing is just being part of the conversation. Right now, stormwater is so new and so young compared to other infrastructure sectors that we're having a great impact just in the couple of years that we've been around on policy and other types of things, because we're making the world as we go along. A lot of other infrastructure sectors have already kind of blazed that path, in the past. We're doing that right now, and so we can be very impactful in a beneficial way. And this is not being contrary. This is not pushing back against everything. This is trying to move things forward, but do so in a way that's practical and pragmatic from the MS4 context. So would love for folks to join on. Okay, so I'm going to get onto the point of sector. If you can go to the next slide, or actually 2 slides would be great. I call it putting on your big boy pants for the stormwater sector. I've got a child at home, so maybe I'm in parent mode on that. But anyway, so I just want to share a couple thoughts about why I think we are moving towards that big, the adults table, and where we are now, where we're going. A big thing happened yesterday, and I mentioned this early on. The ASCE Infrastructure Report Card, which is something that many of you have probably heard about before. In the past, they come out every 4 years when there's a new presidential term. And it's always this time of year, and right after things get started with the new administrations or new terms. And they've never had stormwater as a separate category. You can see all the categories listed there. For the very first time, starting yesterday, stormwater is included in the stormwater report card. So and we got one of the lowest grades. We got a D. I think there were only 4 others in this whole thing that had a D. So we're clearly have great needs. This is going to help us advocate for funding and other types of support. So this is a data point. Again, we're thinking about that thing I talked about, William Ruckles' house. This water quality issue of the day is urban stormwater runoff and ag runoff. This shows that we're getting there. We're getting to the big kids table. We're part of all the other infrastructure sectors up here, which is great. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that this even happened was because there was just more data that's needed. One group that stepped up was the Water Environment Federation, which is a group that we work with, NAMSA works with. They've done national surveys, statistically significant surveys of MS4s in 2018 and 2020. They just released their 2020 survey, and that information was fed into the ASCE. That kind of provided that information that they needed to be able to provide a grade for the sector. One of the big takeaways there is that there's an $8 billion annual funding gap in the MS4 sector. We're talking about municipal budgets of between, I think, 18 and 24 billion. So 8 billion is significant. That's a third, potentially, a third of existing or more of budgets that we need in the future. One thing I wanted to mention is that Second Nature is actually part of putting together a data dashboard. So if you can go to the link that's listed there, there's a link to the data dashboard that Second Nature put together, and that allows you to play with the data yourself and see how it works. What does it look like in your region or your area? You can go through a lot of information yourself. So it's a cool thing, but that's the power of data. That's the point. Next slide, please. Another thing is that we have been working in legislation and with EPA to try to get more funding for the sector. That's the number one thing that comes up everywhere, right? And there's EPA's and Congress actually responded and said, okay, we're going to put together a task force and we're going to study this. And they have a task force report that came out as a draft version at this point. And it's going to be finalized and it's going to be sent to Congress and be official probably sometime in April or May. But we still have a lot of stuff to look at, and there's just some draft recommendations to consider. And look at how significant these are. We're talking about 10% of all federal farm subsidies. That's a huge number. If they carve out that much and provide that to stormwater, or maybe a new construction grants program, which was that construction grants program for wastewater that paid for a half of all public capital infrastructure investment between 1972 and Clean Water Act was passed, and like the early to mid 80s. So I mean, this is significant, and help is on the way. This has been a long time coming, I know, but this is another data point that things are moving forward. Next slide, please. The construction grants program turned into the state revolving fund, and most folks in the stormwater sector are like, why are we even talking about this? Because we never, we don't get assistance that way. Well, you can look at the pie chart there. That's not a great pie chart because it shows that over, because the construction grants program turned into the state revolving program, this all seems wonkish, but this does have relevance here. And that happened in about 1989 or 1987. It's part of the 1987 Clean Water Act amendments, and that was enacted in 1989 or so, or 1990. And since then, they wanted to have a program that was states could run themselves and kind of finance. And so every time there's a transaction, it revolves, and you can make money and become kind of self-sustaining to a certain degree. And that's the whole point of this. So, but only 3% of the total amount of assistance since 1990 or so, which is when we had the first phase ones come online too. We've only had 3% of this assistance go to stormwater. We're trying to change that. We're trying to look for new ways to make this a relevant program for us or create something new. So again, that's something that we're working on with other groups as well. But again, this is another data point. We need more funding, and now we're seeing responses happen. We and others are bringing this to the table and saying, hey, look, this is a problem. It's been working for the wastewater sector. It's not working for us right now. We need to change that. Next slide, please. Related to funding and assets, again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we need data and information to drive an understanding of what our needs are. And the biggest issues are funding, frankly, and understanding what your infrastructure assets are. So in that context, over 95%, actually I heard 98% yesterday is the first time I've heard as high as that, but a significant, almost, a lot, which is, we're talking about federal funding, which is great, and that's going to increase over time, but still a vast majority of funding comes from local levels for water infrastructure, many other infrastructure types. But the problem here is for stormwater is we only have depending on how you measure it, between a quarter and a third of all municipalities out there, or regulated municipalities, have some kind of dedicated funding source. And even if it does exist, oftentimes it's undervalued or underfunded. So we're focusing on that. We're trying to highlight that, trying to support state legislation in places where it's tough to get that done. California has the Prop 218 as an example. That's a challenging issue, but there's several other states, Michigan and I think Missouri, have some similar challenges there. And so to highlight that, we've worked with Second Nature to develop a map that shows all because Western Kentucky University provides a survey every couple of years. Black and Veatch has a survey that comes out every couple of years as well. That's great in that tabular form. It provides information that way. We want again, the power of data, spatial data, specifically, to put it into map format. You can go there and map it around. We haven't launched it yet, but we're working on it, and we hope to get that out in the near future. And then on asset management, again, this ties in with the whole data thing, that if we don't know what we have, but we're not, how can we finance? How can we advocate that we have a significant need? And there's been recent surveys, I mentioned the WEF MS4 survey, found out that about half of MS4 said that they have some kind of asset management plan, right? My guess is that a lot of those aren't really formal asset management plans. And there was actually a great example that we've highlighted in a webinar from Florida and their DOT. That's a really good asset management plan. So there are some, but there's a lot that haven't gone down the pathway. This needs to change, and that's something that I just want to bring up as another data need that we have. Okay, next slide. I think that's my last slide. To tie this all together, again, we need information, we need data to advocate, and we need to get our arms around things. One thing, a couple things to think about. There's something called e-reporting, electronic reporting. This is something that the EPA has been going through for several years through different sectors. And the MS4 sector is the next on their list. And so we're actually, NAMSA is going to be hosting a webinar. It's not been scheduled yet, but probably in the next couple of months. Hopefully Second Nature and ESRI are going to be part of that too. I think they are, but we still have to figure that out. But the point is that we're not getting to the world where we're going to have no more paper reports and all that stuff, which folks should be really happy about. This is going to be about replacing all of that with spreadsheets and being more efficient, so you can spend more of your resources actually doing things, putting things in the ground, doing work, as opposed to reporting on things. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be reporting. It's just a more efficient way of reporting. So that again ties to the need for data in the stormwater sector. And as a national organization, like I said, ASCE couldn't. They just the water sector is data poor. Stormwater is the poorest of the water poor or data poor in the water sector. So we don't really have a true idea of what are our existing assets. If someone were to say, so how much is in the ground? How many, what's the value of stormwater BMPs or MS4s? And I don't think anybody can definitively say that right now. So if we can't say how much we have, we can't say what the assets, or, the condition of the assets are, like I said, asset management. Then how do we advocate? Transportation sector, rail, all these others, they know they've got all that information. We don't. We need to get that. And then one of the challenges is that there's inconsistencies in how MS4s categorize and even name these things. So with that in mind, there's a need for data standardization. And again, this is something that ESRI and Second Nature are working on, and we hope to roll that out for everybody so that we can, as a national organization, we can say, look, definitively, we've got this many millions of miles of MS4, conveyance, and it's this, most of it's X years old, and most of it is in poor condition, whatever that is, so that we can advocate better at the national level. Having that is really helpful. And of course, having an understanding of your assets helps you finance. And we need to do more large scale financing as we get more dedicated funding. And this is all part of the maturation of the sector. And that's kind of the point I wanted to bring home. So that's all I have, I believe. Yep, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I might not be able to stay the whole time, but I'll let you know, Martinette, as we move along. If anyone wants to we have a quarterly newsletter that goes out. If you want to register for that information's there. And Martinette, I assume everybody's going to get PDFs of the slides, right? So all the links are there, right?
We'll share all the links, yeah.
Excellent. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time for that, and if not, then I'll either be around or I can get questions from Martinette sent to me and I can follow up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So with that, we are going to go over to Jason. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Martinette, and thanks, Seth. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Yoho. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Second Nature. Seth, that was great. It was really a wonderful overview, I think, of the state of our industry and some of the trends that are really shaping not just where it's going, but the decisions that we see being made from a Second Nature standpoint on a daily basis. So always good to get an update from you, and appreciate everyone joining us this morning. So I run the customer side of the business here at Second Nature, and what I'm going to share with you this morning is a little bit of our perspective on, building on the story that Seth was saying, that our industry, the stormwater industry, is rapidly maturing, and that represents an opportunity, and opportunity for MS4 permit holders and the communities where those permits reside and those programs reside, to really take advantage of compliance in a number of ways. And as Seth mentioned, there's some kind of big things happening from an infrastructure spend standpoint in the U.S. We also think that there are kind of big structural things happening kind of on a state-by-state basis, and then there are programmatic things happening like Ereporting and data standards and things like that. And so what I'll spend some time talking about is how to kind of put that in action and how to position your program today to really demonstrate effectiveness and articulate the return on investment of your program back to the community. So we're based in Santa Cruz, California, for those of you who have maybe not been exposed to Second Nature yet. I'm sitting here in sunny Santa Cruz today. I know and love Florida quite well. I spent a lot of time there. Was just there recently visiting some family. And like many of you, I'm sure, I live my life with my family and my kids either in the water or around the water. Whether we're out surfing or fishing or we're up in the mountains doing skiing this time of year. We're expecting a big storm here in a few days. We're excited for that. And since the first.com wave, I've spent my career watching the cloud disrupt industry after industry and helping customers understand how they can benefit from the commercial cloud. So I'll bring some of that to bear in our conversation today. Thanks, Martinette. There we go. Our mission at Second Nature is to help communities benefit from their stormwater programs by enabling them to demonstrate effectiveness, whether that's regulatory compliance-based effectiveness or business effectiveness, and to put that into a return on investment type of metrics. So we think that this is a very exciting time for the industry. And so I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of background on Second Nature, and then we're going to talk specifically about kind of what we do and how we do it. Second Nature Software was founded in 2016, so we're an early stage technology company. We're just over the hill here in Santa Cruz from Silicon Valley, so we kind of follow that model. Since 2016, we've experienced very rapid growth, but the history, the genesis for the Second Nature platform, it was founded by Nicole Beck. She's our CEO and founder. Nicole has a PhD in aquatic chemistry, and Nicole and her team got their start up in Lake Tahoe on arguably the largest clean water project in the US, which is the Keep Tahoe Blue project. That project, among other things, was focused on trying to understand how stormwater was impacting the very famous clarity of the lake. So Nicole and her team really came in to understand how structural BMPs or structural control measures, stormwater assets were contributing to stormwater volume reduction and pollution reduction, and develop a series of methodologies and models that have been now peer-reviewed and published in scientific journals that are the foundation for the quantification engine, if you will, inside of the Second Nature platform. We're experiencing very rapid growth ourselves. I really attribute that to three key things. One is our science, as I've already mentioned. That should be a key takeaway to the approach. Two is the cloud, my background, right? The cloud has proven itself to bring efficiency and kind of commercial readiness, if you will, to industry after industry. In fact, if we look back even on, for example, the healthcare industry just a few short years ago, things were still not fully digital. And today you can pretty much go into any doctor's office and your records follow you around. And then thirdly, our third key to our success is the fact that we're based in maps. We use GIS technology. Francis Kelly's with us today from ESRI. We're a very tight partner with them. But stormwater programs, of course, are distributed programs managing distributed infrastructure. This is a problem that suits itself very well to GIS technology. We have grown very rapidly. We're now in 11 states. We're kind of adding states at a regular pace now. We've got over 50 customers across the U.S. and we have a very broad base of exposure to stormwater programs now. So we're working not just with permit holders, but we're working with state regulators. We've got a good relationship with the EPA. As Seth mentioned, we're going to be conducting a webinar with them here in the near future around Ereporting and data. And we also just have a kind of a broad look into really stormwater assets that we think is very unique. We've got over 100,000 assets now being managed in the Second Nature platform. This really allows us to bring a lot of best practices into our platform and, of course, out to the community. We'll talk about how we do some of those things today. In addition to open science, we believe in open partnering. We know that it takes a number of different stakeholders and partners and participants to keep your programs running. We value each and every one of those. Second Nature is not interested in disruption, so to speak. We're not interested in introducing risk or change. Think of us in a very similar way to the way you might think of QuickBooks, right? Obviously, QuickBooks did not put accountants out of business. In fact, there are probably way more accountants than there are today, but instead really provided a platform to centralize data and to really provide insight into the meaning of information and data. And that's what the Second Nature platform does. So happy to talk with any engineering consulting firms, any other partners that might be on the call today. Always looking to establish new relationships. Stormwater programs and the information systems and the workflows that support them grew up over decades, and they grew up mostly relying on information and data from other departments that did not communicate very well with each other electronically. And so what we have in our industry is we have essentially a series of data silos that exist. Those data silos make demonstrating program effectiveness challenging, to say the least. There's complexity there. There's obviously very high costs. There's often kind of a custom application development effort that kind of tries to layer on top of that complexity to try and reduce it and provide some insight and some transparency. That, of course, leads to kind of very fragile, very brittle, very difficult to maintain over time type of systems. The commercial cloud changes that equation entirely. As we all know, we rely on the commercial cloud on our daily basis in our daily lives all of the time. We watch Netflix, we use our smartphones. Your municipality, your permit holder, uses the commercial cloud and subscription-based access all of the time, whether it's working with Microsoft or SAP on financials or ESRI or even WebEx like this webinar today. The commercial cloud is the standard for breaking down those data silos so that information can flow, so that cost gets reduced, so complexity gets reduced significantly. So that's fundamentally what we do at Second Nature. We talk about centralizing your program into the cloud, programmatic elements, data elements, breaking down those data silos, and really shifting the service delivery model. Most stormwater programs today are relying on services from various departments. What we talk about is kind of turning that the other way around, creating a capability within stormwater programs to essentially run their programs as a digital service delivery model that allows them to provide services back out, whether those are services that are programmatic across minimum control requirements, kind of operationally on a daily basis, understanding what priorities are, or on a weekly basis, or from a business perspective, being able to analyze performance across the program, across assets, and of course, being able to communicate that performance, whether that's back out to the public or within other departments, or up to the regulator from a compliance standpoint. Second Nature, of course, is a partner with ESRI. As an early stage company, we're quite proud that we're already a silver partner. We've got a number of specialties and certifications. What this means is we work very closely with ESRI from a technology standpoint, from an industry standpoint, to make sure that we're sharing all of the things that we're learning about how to develop the gold standard around data, around GIS for stormwater. So we have a very deep collaboration with ESRI. On the next slide, please, Martinette, where we're, as Seth alluded to, where we're working on understanding how do we take what we've learned from those over $100,000, $5 billion worth of stormwater assets that are under management in the Second Nature platform, and really break down which data elements matter. How do we create a scalable data foundation, if you will, together that we can rely on to understand how to measure effectiveness across a variety of different metrics. And so we're going to show you how we do that in a few minutes. Of course, because the commercial cloud is in the cloud, what this means for municipalities and permit holders is not just the transparency, the effectiveness, the reduction of complexity and cost, but it means that we can get away with kind of that old model of having to install servers and software and have patches and custom development. All of that goes away, and now it's a URL. It also means that it's highly integrated with a very robust set of field-based applications that take your forms, bring them to the field, and from the minute the data is collected, start centralizing that data into that data schema, if you will, that allows it to be reported against in a very scalable way. So what Second Nature then is able to do to communicate the stormwater opportunity back out to communities is we're able to use our science to develop a series of baselines that help us understand what does stormwater opportunity look like from a kind of traditional permit standpoint or regulatory standpoint, whether that's stormwater volume runoff, whether that's particulate load or pollution load, Many states have trash and litter priorities as well, but we can extend the platform, and we do, to look at parameters that exist outside of your compliance, outside of your regulatory permit, to take into consideration things that might be community-based, for example. How do we understand stormwater opportunity, where to invest in the program, where to invest in assets from a green space perspective, for example? How can we use an investment in the program or in assets to create maybe a park in a community that might be social or economic disadvantaged? Or how do we use stormwater infrastructure investment to create local jobs in neighborhoods where those are needed? So really beginning to broaden the definition of what opportunity looks like, so that we can, on the next slide, start thinking about how to align that opportunity with access to additional funding, so that we can communicate those opportunities across various stakeholders out in the community, and so that we can begin to put some metrics in place that allow to measure those things on an ongoing basis, because we see stormwater really as an asset to communities, an asset that has long-term value, and an asset that has a measurable return on investment. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle Tanner so she can actually show you some of the Second Nature software.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I will jump into a software demo. Let me share my screen. So I think Jason mentioned this earlier, but Second Nature software, we are entirely cloud-based. So we're not installing any servers on premise. You're not having to download any desktop applications or anything like that. We're entirely accessible through a web browser, and you would get a URL. And so logging into our software here, it first takes you to a landing page. And so the way we've kind of developed and broken out our software is into different modules. And you'll see each of these modules is kind of tied to one of those minimum control measures that are within your stormwater permit. So we have modules and tools that are focused on construction site runoff management, municipal maintenance, so catch basin cleaning and inventorying your street sweeping program. We also have tools for urban outfall monitoring, so doing those dry weather and wet weather inspections in the field. And then we also have tools for industrial commercial facilities, so going out, doing those yearly site inspections, anything like that. So really these modules here, we've designed to be kind of like your data management and that inspection form. So anything that you do on a day-to-day basis. And so what's cool about Second Nature is because we have that standardized data schema, that underlying data standard, we can then pull data from these different modules where you collect, over your year, and we can start to produce dashboards and do a lot of hydrologic modeling and create these maps and summaries and charts that really help you with your annual reporting. So then this tool right here really aggregates all of your data, and we can start to show you trend analysis, compile summaries. So really when it comes time for your annual report for stormwater, it's really already there for you in Second Nature, not having to go back between departments and ask, how many sites did we inspect or how many assets did we install this year? So I'll show you a bit of our reporting tool, and then I'll also show you how our data management tools work as well. And then we also have strategic planning tools. So this gets to be really cool because it's looking at that, what Jason mentioned earlier, that multi-benefit analysis of where to locate projects or where's the best site to identify for a green street or redevelopment. So we can pull in various GIS layers from the Living Atlas that ESRI hosts and do some really cool analysis on locations, anything like that. So I'll jump into our structural BMP tool here and kind of give you all an overview of how we structure our software platform. So I'll turn off a few layers here, but what you'll see throughout the software is that everything in our platform is entirely map-based and very location-centric. So you'll see here, this is in a demo account, so we're in actually California, but what we get right out of the box is a map of your MS4. So we pull in GIS data related to your MS4, so looking at your boundary, your jurisdiction. We can then start to look at the streams and the water bodies that are flowing within and throughout your MS4. We can then look at that and identify which ones are 303D listed. So which ones you might have TMDLs for, which ones are considered high priority. And then we can start to get down into the details of your MS4. So mapping your outfalls, we can pull in GIS layers from ArcGIS Online if you already have those mapped in GIS. You can also use our tools to go out into the field and identify areas that you need to collect data. So we can put outfalls on a map here. That's what these points are showing. And then we can also take your storm drain infrastructure data. So looking at the pipes and the catch basins, inlets and outlets. So we can map that. And that's what these lines are showing here. And actually what we do at Second Nature is we take all of those data. So the storm drains, your outfalls, your streams, and then we use that with local topography. And we actually help you guys delineate sub-watersheds and drainages within the city. So if I zoom out a little bit, you can see on this left-hand side, we have this table that shows all of the main water bodies or receiving waters within the MS4. So we use all of the data that we can in GIS and from topography, and we help you delineate these very specific urban drainages within your MS4. So we can identify specifically what areas drain to what outfalls, really linking that urban landscape to the receiving waters within your MS4. So before we even get into any other specifics, right away you kind of get that linkage and understanding hydrologic understanding of how water flows throughout your city. And that's kind of the baseline. From there, we can start to layer other bits of information on top of that. So if I turn on this layer right here, what this is showing is structural BMPs. And I know sometimes that term can vary across states, but in our words, structural BMPs are those engineered stormwater devices that you put in the ground to retain or filter out stormwater pollutants. And so what we have here is we've built out a tool that helps you inventory these assets. And then from our data standard, we can really do some quick condition assessments. So assessing the condition of these structural BMPs, putting it into data standard where then you can communicate towards your regulator or with other MS4s within your state about your program. So if I click on a point here, it's just like a regular GIS where you can turn layers on and off, you can click on points and it brings up pop-ups. And you'll see here that it has some information about this structural BMP. What's pretty cool is if you use our tools in the field, we can take photos and add captions. Everything's kind of time-stamped. So you really have that full system of record. So if you ever need to do any kind of reporting or if you get an audit down the road from the EPA, it's kind of already there for you in the platform. And so I'll click into this BMP and kind of walk you all through how we do our asset inventory. And so what's pretty cool about our platform, again, like I said, we pull in a lot of locally available data sets from your MS4. So we can pull in parcel information. So as soon as you drop a point on a map, we can identify various GIS layers related to that BMP. So here we have the parcel identifier. We know the land use that it's on. We can actually identify street addresses for you. So when you're identifying sites, that's already kind of available. And then we can start to get into specifics about the BMP. So the data standard that we helped develop in the Lake Tahoe Basin that Jason was alluding to before was really understanding how these structures treat stormwater. And so we decided to identify, I think it's about 15 different BMP types, and they're all specifically typed by how they treat stormwater. So whether it be through infiltration or sediment removal, or maybe it's flowing through a media filter, all of those are specifically typed to how they treat stormwater. And so that's really what this type is looking at here. And with a subscription from Second Nature is obviously the tool that you're seeing here, but also access to our data standard and our definitions and protocols on how we think about stormwater programs. And then we really have this kind of full system of record inventory of BMPs. So we can identify type-specific information about the asset, how large is it, how much water can it hold. We can start to look at design storm types. So if it's designed to treat 24-hour storm, 85th percentile, that can change across states. And then we can start to also link it to existing files. So if you have operations and maintenance agreements, engineering design plans, anything like that, you can upload it directly to the platform here, or we have ways where you can actually link it to an existing file management system like SharePoint or Google Drive. And then within the system here is also tools where you can actually draw drainage areas and project boundaries within the platform. So you're not having to flip between a GIS application and Second Nature. It's already built in here for you. And then this creates a GIS layer that you can push out to ArcGIS Online or other dashboards to your liking. So this is pretty cool. I can just draw the drainage area that drains to this little bioretention, and we can calculate things automatically like total area. We can also look at particular land uses in the drainage. So that's super helpful for things like trash capture devices or specific BMPs. And then we can pull in other data layers like impervious surfaces and calculate that. So really we get a full inventory of where these BMPs are. Now we have their types, so we know how they treat stormwater. Bioretention, it's through infiltration and some vegetation. And then we've delineated the drainage area. So now we know exactly how much area is treated by these BMPs. And so what we get now, if I zoom out a little bit, is a map of where the BMPs are and their types and their drainage areas. But what we're missing still is the colors. And so what we've developed with, again, in the research that we've done in Lake Tahoe Basin, is a really quick assessment methodology where you can go out into the field and assess the condition of these structures. So making sure that these things are performing well, that they've been maintained, because it's assumed, over time, as they treat stormwater, they're going to get clogged with sediment. Inlets might become broken or dysfunctional. So we have a really easy set of field assessments that you can use on a tablet or a mobile device. 2Inform or Second Nature software is mobile friendly, so you don't have to download a separate application. It actually just works for you in the web browser. And then from the field assessments that we've developed, we came up with a scoring method. So we have a score between 0 and 5. And once you do your field observations, you can hit calculate score. And anything that's a score of 3 or above means that the BMP is performing well. So you might have just done some maintenance, or maybe it was just installed, but the vegetation is looking healthy, it infiltrates water pretty quickly, and we can assume that it's all good and you don't need to do maintenance for maybe another 6 months or another year. On the flip side, if you do your observation and you get a score of 2 or 0, that kind of flags it in our software for, hey, this might need maintenance soon, or this is super urgent, it looks like something's failing. So then we can kind of pull that data, and I can show this in a minute, but start to populate to-do lists, or we could publish it to work order management systems, so you can know which sites that your public works crew needs to go out and maintain. So I'm just doing a quick assessment here on the bioretention. I'm looking at the soil, making sure that's good, looking at how fast it infiltrates water, and then I can hit this calculate score. So here I've got a score of 5, so just like I said, we can assume it's performing well, and that assessment only takes about 5 to 20 minutes. So it's nothing like crazy engineering surveys or anything like that. It's really quick, rapid assessment where you can really look at the condition of the BMP. If I change a few things about my assessment here, you'll see that the score will change. So if I hit calculate score now it's got a score of 0. So this will flag the BMP as red. It'll change the icon to red. It'll save that record, and now we can identify the site as something that needs maintenance. So now that I'm zooming out, you get a pretty good idea of, the green BMPs, where your assets are that are performing well, red, which ones need maintenance. And then we can actually take this one step further and now look at these 3 tasks. So if I click on this maintenance due list here, this is really identifying just the assets that have that failing score. So again, we can take this list and we can publish it to work order management systems. You can notify your field crew that they need to go out and maintain these systems. So it's really fast, easy to use. Yeah. So once we have that in place, now we can do some really cool kind of analytics and modeling in the platform. So I'll actually switch gears a little bit, and now I'll jump into our reporting tool here. And so I mentioned this earlier in the demo, but the way our reporting tool works is it's really just aggregating data from all of those different data management modules. We can start to create these summaries and these charts and kind of like snapshot maps. So I can go down to my structural BMP map for the year 2021, and it has some summaries of, how many assets do we have, how much area is it treating, how many were functional or failing, and we get a really quick idea of what we did for that year. We can now take this one step further, and instead of just looking at those different parts of our program, now we can actually look at the program impact. So what the program impact part of our reporting tool is looking at is that kind of like KPIs, those key performance indicators of your program, really identifying how your program is doing over time as you implement street sweeping or green infrastructure. We can start to estimate potential pollutant reductions from those BMPs. So I'll click into one of these, and then I'll actually go to this tab right here. And so what's pretty cool about our platform here is that we have a hydrologic model that's built into the platform. So it's not requiring any additional user input or anything like that. We pull in locally, publicly available data sets from things like the Living Atlas, where we can display soil information. So we can pull in local soil maps, which is what's shown right here. We can also pull in local rainfall data, impervious data sets, and local land use, usually from your parcel layer. So all of those data sets we can pull into, and then we combine them together. And we can start to calculate what we're calling baseline particulate loads and baseline stormwater volume loads. And what that means is it's really looking at the landscape of your MS4 and calculating what we think the amount of pollution would run off the landscape if you had no structural BMPs in place, no street sweeping, or anything like that. So I'll go to this baseline here. And so what we've done here is we have our baseline particulate opportunity. So we think about 319 tons per year of sediment are running off the landscape of this demo account into these various receiving waters. And then we actually take that data and we aggregate it up to the catchments that I was showing earlier. So these are all those specific drainages within your city, and we can identify by coloring them which catchments are considered priorities. So really the darker areas here, the darker drainages, these are showing areas that have relatively highest amount of particulate loads. So these are areas where really you could focus on maybe increasing street sweeping if you're looking at particulates, or identifying projects that help with sediment removal, anything like that. We can also, again, overlay this with looking at your streams layer. Because we have this kind of aggregated up to drainages, we can also look at specific watersheds and water bodies. So a great example over here in California, the Watsonville Slough has a couple TMDLs, it's highly impaired. So now we can really focus in on our modeling results specifically for the Watsonville Slough. So here we can see the baseline estimates is around 115 tons per year of sediment, and I can identify the priority catchments within that watershed. We can also do the same thing for stormwater volume, so looking at sheer runoff of water, and this might be good to identify where you can again install green infrastructure or any kind of other stormwater treatment ponds. Now, going back to what I was showing earlier in the structural BMP tool, we identified where our assets are. We have that kind of standardized BMP type, so we know how it treats stormwater. And I also showed you how we can delineate the drainage areas. So we know specifically what areas are treated by what assets. So we can now incorporate that kind of information into the same hydrologic model. So if I tab over to this progress map here, and I'll turn this off right here, what this is showing is kind of the flip side of our opportunity map. So now this is showing results that have the BMPs incorporated in them. The darker drainages here have are the catchments that have the highest implementation of structural BMPs or runoff disconnection, really anything that we can model stormwater treatment from. And then we can do the same thing. So we can look at particular watersheds here. So again, I can click on the Watsonville Slough, and we can see that we estimate about 14% reduction from their baseline due to structural BMPs or runoff disconnection, which is low impact development, site design, things like that. And again, we can do the same exact thing for particulates. So looking at sediment, total suspended solids, anything like that. And we can start to model street sweeping as well. So looking at if you do any kind of structural or non-structural controls, how that affects your sediment loads. And so we can see here we have about 40% reduction. Now, if you're not too savvy to looking at a map, we also have this pretty cool kind of chart and time series. So we can start to look at your MS4 and your stormwater program's progress, but now over time. So the idea is as you implement more structural BMPs or other programmatic elements, your reductions should be increasing. So here we can see for the Watsonville Slough specifically, they've reduced, almost 40% of their particulates. We can then look at the MS4 as a whole. here for particulates, and then do the same thing for runoff volumes, so looking at volumes of water. And then lastly, we can also look at things like trash levels. So you can do visual observations of trash within your city, and we can do the same kind of thing where we calculate a baseline, and then we track our progress against that baseline. So the trash looks pretty cool because we can identify areas that have hot spots of litter, which ones have cold spots or have been treated by some kind of trash capture device. And then we can look at a chart here that shows the same kind of thing where it's breaking down your results by what's treated, what's not treated. And then in Second Nature, we also have these kind of summary ad libs. I think the summaries are super cool because it's kind of like a thing where you can just almost copy and paste it, put it in your annual report. It's really fast and it's already kind of produced for you in Second Nature. And so I think that's a good stopping point. I'll stop there. And again, if anyone has any questions during the rest of the session, feel free to chat us, add it to the Q&A, and I can answer it, or we can get to questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was super informative and really comprehensive as well. I did drop a link into the chat window for everyone. If you want a one-on-one software demo, please feel free to reach out, and Michelle will be providing that one-on-one demo for you as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Francis. Francis, welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Martinette, thanks so much. And a special thank you to Martinette for keeping us all on time and really being our adult supervision. I really always appreciate her and the work she does to frame us and get us through. Thanks so much for your introduction, and really thanks to Seth for kind of setting the table and inspiring the thinking around, hey, you know, how do we evolve from that kids table to the adult table, and how we can all come together and really communicate what's happening in our own areas to kind of inform where we might go next as far as a standard and how we can kind of really come together as a community of communities. And then really reflecting on Jason's time to really think about this process of evolving our thinking around doing more with technology to support the goals that we have specifically around stormwater. And you know, those things that have come together over the past several years in terms of technology and sometimes this idea of the consumerization of IT, where we now have devices and this concept of always having a location that's kind of attached to us. We're kind of taking those concepts and bringing them to you as a stormwater compliance person or personnel with a team that you're really kind of investigating that next step. And really we fed right into Michelle's fantastic demo, and coming from her perspective and the lens of being in the seat and kind of dealing with this at a manual, dealing with these processes at a manual level and moving forward and kind of taking the best parts of technology and applying those to a somewhat manual process. So with that, I think, you know, ESRI as a company kind of wants to draw together those technologies, support those technologies, and really support the evolution of thinking around a story that comes from something that's kind of a manual process all the way in. So my name's Francis. I work at ESRI, and ESRI, we believe in really mapping and location and taking a geographic approach. And when I think about our relationship with Second Nature, I think also about how we go to market at ESRI, and sometimes really our tagline is the science of where. And that's really what Second Nature is offering us, is really the science of that location and what's going on. And then we also talk about at ESRI, the science of where and the knowledge of next. So grabbing all that information from our assets gives us that opportunity to take that step to the knowledge of next. And then early this year, we talked a lot about see what others can't. And really, when you think about Michelle's demonstration, we're actually able to see what others can't. Like, we look at our stormwater process and progress, we look at communicating that to our constituents, both internal and external. So I think the story really resonates as far as being in the partner program and supporting our relationship. So my role here is to talk about some of the talk about ESRI, I think a lot of organizations that are just kind of getting involved in mapping and location, especially those of you here in Florida, probably hear this term ArcGIS, and you hear about this great big company ESRI, and a lot of people don't know us very well. So I wanted to start off and take a kind of a tour of what we do and who we are at ESRI, because it's a really great story. And it really does match the folks at Second Nature, because just like Second Nature, we took an applied knowledge and science and built product around that. And so when you think about the iconic Keep Tahoe Blue stickers, you know, my kind of friendship with Nicole, the founder of Second Nature, and the work that they did there and applying that science and really kind of iterating on that science and expressing that in product, it really follows the same journey that ESRI took over the last 50 years of establishing ourselves as the leader in mapping and location, because really what we believe is that mapping and location and spatial analytics provide that next step in our journey of understanding. And we are global. ESRI is a huge organization, but we really are taking that large organization and going local. Here in Florida, we have an office in Florida, all over the United States, and then also internationally, we have distributors. We really provide organizations, again, that next step in mapping and location and understanding that sense of place and space. And I always challenge people to say, you know, you can't ever not be somewhere, right? So on the next slide, I think we talk a little bit about what our impact is. And I think a lot of folks know ESRI and ArcGIS over the last year of our lives as the COVID dashboards brought by Johns Hopkins University. And when you think about the just sheer number of traffic or hits that we've gotten just on that COVID dashboard alone, in the billions of hits, but also taking that data and bringing that locally. So every year, ESRI software is used by large organizations big and small. When I talk to a lot of folks in state and local government, the sector that I serve at ESRI, really all of our state governments have access to ESRI technology. Often I tell folks, if you're a community of over 100,000, a population of 100,000, there's probably some ESRI technology in your organization taking on that mapping and location. One big compelling thing, and I think this also matches our relationship with Second Nature, we spend 30% of our revenue on research and development. We put back a lot of investment into our product development. And then as we talked about today with the Living Atlas and some of the content that Second Nature is able to grab from ESRI, we have about 1 billion views of our maps and data sets. So if you're thinking about this move to the cloud and somewhat, wow, this is somewhat scary, we've been there. You can trust that ESRI has not only the stable backend, but also the security patterns that you would trust. And those are the things that Second Nature is really leveraging, along with our great mapping and location technologies and deep analytics. But also they're carrying along all that security for the cloud that is so important. So if you look here, more than 142,000 people interact with our story maps, and that's per day. And then, with our ArcGIS Online maps and layers, it is by the billions and billions, and the amount of folks who are really dependent on the cloud today, just in terms of our ArcGIS Online technology, you can certainly have, confidence in the support that we're going to be able to give you in your journey, moving from somewhat manual to a digital process. On the next slide, we'll really talk about who we serve, and it really, as we've seen in the demo that Michelle provided, we really can support from the folks out in the field that are just taking an asset inventory all the way up to that executive, that analyst who really needs to take another look at that data. And all through that permissions-based, we can give the right access to the right data and the right tools to those people, and we can serve the entire span of not only internal to your organization, but we also have this opportunity to go external and showcase what we're doing in our program, in our MS4 program, to not only our constituents who are part of our organization, but also externally in something we call ArcGIS Hub. So we serve across the organization anyone who needs to consume more information using mapping and location. We'll move to that next slide. So, and industries and business needs, when I think back and I reflect on not only our demo, but our discussion today around where your journey might be going when you think about this concept of digital transformation in your organization and moving from maybe, again, that manual to a digital process, those business needs, I like to kind of focus on those today's needs, right? Asset tracking and analysis. You want to be able to, understand where that asset is and take a look at it, and always going back, as we saw in the demo, and being able to easily not only see that asset, but also grade that asset and take action on that asset, because that's really important to us for that time over target as we look at embracing that digital transformation. Logistics and fulfillment, performance monitoring is a lot of what you folks are confronted with or faced with as you look out at your MS4 compliance and saying, hey, how do I have a performance management system that's going to support both my internal and external constituents? Situational awareness, where are we? Where do we want to be? And sometimes we talk about a goal of being, something we're going to strive for, but, perfection being a journey and not a destination. So when I look at today's needs, it's very much aligned with what we're talking about today and tomorrow's opportunities. When you think about operational efficiency, risk management, territory planning, those are all things that you're really thinking about as you look forward at your program today, but then up at the vision that you have for your program in the future. And I feel that ESRI's technology as a platform can support not only Second Nature's goals as a product company, but also this discussion on where we want to go with standards and how ESRI would support those as a platform organization. So we'll move to the next slide and really talk about ESRI's technology. Now, I had a partner of mine say, hey, we'd like a demo of ESRI's technology. And I was like, wow, we could be there for a long time because it's fairly broad in terms of our technology. But really what we do at the end of the day is support mapping and location enablement across the enterprise. And that starts mainly with field operations, right? Folks in the field taking asset inventory, taking pictures, taking some kind of information and bringing that back to a centralized location so we can understand it and take action. So if you look at all those geospatial capabilities, we go all the way through from the beginning of the start of your journey all the way to looking at your spatial business intelligence. Because as you create that data, you're going to want to look through that or look back at it for those trends and be able to address the future based on the knowledge of yesterday. So we'll look at the next slide. And when we look at our markets at ESRI, really it's that GIS system of record. And you folks looking at this Second Nature product today are really looking at that, establishing that GIS system of record that you can showcase as a map out to your constituents and then provide that location intelligence. So it's really interesting that in some of the markets, tried and true GIS market, 50-year-old company, we focus every day on geographic information systems. I sometimes refer to them as geographic information solutions because many times we're kind of taking that system of record and exposing it in different ways to provide that concept of mapping and then location intelligence. So those are the markets we serve. And that really is, you guys and gals on the phone are probably experiences like, hey, this isn't anything new because everything you do is location based, and that system of record is informing the location you are. Whether you're looking at a structural BMP or your next time you're out at a restaurant, and hopefully that is in the next 90 to 180 days for us. Next slide, for. So our business model. When we go to market directly here in the United States, we serve our organizations in state and local by providing them enterprise agreements, industry bundles, or just products that they can purchase off the shelf. And ESRI has, of course, a complete portfolio of services, but most of the time that as a software company, we depend on our partners to really get to a specific solution or a specific service to support our customers, because with a reach like we have, we need our partners to really get specific again on a specific product or solution or in a service area. So we really expand our reach through our partnerships at ESRI and find that business model to be very powerful as they adopt some of our technologies. And as we look at our next slide, take a little drink and break here. I really wanted to use this slide as a transition today, because really when you think about kind of conceptually kind of abstracting the things that we're talking about when we talk about this digital transformation, we go from this concept of from measurement to action, right? So we first look out and we identify and we locate our assets and we get them kind of under management. We say, hey, what's going on with that asset out in the field? And then we're going to provide some visualization and mapping. We're going to have our assets under inventory. We'll be able to view those in terms of where they are and how they're feeling and how they're working for our overall goals. And then we're going to provide some analysis and modeling, that opportunity to look back and model forward. Then some planning and design, because as Michelle said and showed today, there's some areas that might be a concern if we have only one outlet. Maybe there's some different construction or things that have gone on that might make us this desire to have that future planning. And that's going to inform our decision making and then our action. So really GIS provides that process and a framework, so really we can actually go from that measurement to action, right? Because we want to inform, again, not only our internal constituents, but our external community, how things are going and where they are as they relate to our compliance and where we're going with our stormwater, because this is a very important part of that entire ecosystem. And really, as in a way, as you look at this further validates our evolution and our move. As a kid from a large family, moving from that kids table to the adult table was a really interesting move. You kind of got called up, and I think when we all get called up, there's a good opportunity to take all the measurement we have, really surface that up, see what's working, what's not, where we can do better, and really find a place in space for standards to start to be kind of communicated and kind of dealt with for the stormwater industry. So really, on our next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our go-to-market opportunities that really, the reason why I'm bringing those up is when we work with our partners, it really establishes a new ground for how we work and how we go to market. And I would say that in the time I've been at ESRI and as a partner of ESRI, especially in the stormwater area, I've never seen a tighter integration from a sales, marketing, and technical perspective. And I think that's really when we talk about going to market. A lot of the partners really love to carry ESRI's brand, but at Second Nature, these folks are carrying our brand, they're carrying our specialties, and they're carrying our technology right into you folks. So when we work, as we look at the next slide, when we work together with Second Nature, we actually have them not only market and sell with ESRI teams to large DOTs who really need that mapping and location intelligence applied to their MS4 permitting, we co-sell together, we go arm in arm into those big shops, so that there is a pattern where we're really, Jason and the team are actually aligning with our executives and going at a state level and saying, hey, let's work this out at a state level and make sure that you can harness the power of GIS and the to inform from Second Nature and go together in that space. And as we look at the next slide, and really what we're talking about today is really this concept of solution delivery licensing. This is where really Second Nature has been able to not only harness our security model and our identity model, but all that rich mapping and location into a very targeted and focused product for and in support of the MS4 permit holder. And that's a really cool way to start your journey with GIS and mapping, because you can actually graduate along a path from where you are with Second Nature and their product line as a SaaS offering to, a SaaS offering plus maybe some more robust ArcGIS capabilities. But we really want you to know that these folks at Second Nature have leveraged these great capabilities, and they stay with it. They stay on pace with ESRI to make sure as we add more capabilities to our product, they can leverage those as needed to really affect your bottom line in a SaaS environment. In our next slide, we talk about some of our bundling opportunities, because some organizations say, I want the power of Second Nature and all the goodness that they provide, but I see, inherent value as a new customer in having a full robust license of ArcGIS, and you can bundle those two together. And the good news here is we've empowered Second Nature as our partner to really have these models and really embrace you as a customer in that journey, whether it be a SaaS offering that you need to have a very targeted and focused for your MS4 permitting, or hey, maybe there's some public works folks that really need some more capabilities and the richness. And the good news here is that Second Nature not only knows our products from the perspective as they leverage our capabilities, but they also know our products from that full stack, and because they've used them. So that those are the kind of things that really we talk about, that better together story. And sometimes I think about that as kind of a zipper, like we are connected really in support of the stormwater management part of the business in a very meaningful way, and we really enjoy that. So I think on my next slide, in closing, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I kind of maybe took a little bit too much time, Martinette will slap my hand next time, is at ESRI we talk about the science of where, and that is very much a location-based partnership that we have with Second Nature, because they're bringing together that concept of that science of that location, and they continue to write papers and test their science and iterate on it and bring that goodness right to you as a customer. And that's really a very meaningful thing from a partnership perspective. And then as we went out this year, as ESRI is a great big company, we talked about see what others can't. And I think most of all, when we think about a stormwater program, there is that concept of giving your internal and external customer that really, with this digital transformation, that rapid way of viewing that compliance or not in compliance, or some of the goals and vision you might have for your program. So when we think about the science of where, the knowledge of next, and then see what others can't, it really becomes an even better story that all of us have come together for really you, our customers and our prospects in this area to really help you see through this vision, move from that manual process to electronic, start to come together as a community and think about what's working well, not so well, and how we can kind of define some level of standards and bubble those up and be a community of communities and share those learnings together and see where we can evolve. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I think that was my last slide, Martinette, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. And you're actually right on time, so no hand slapping will occur today. All right, I will hand it over to the group for discussion now on how to get started with a digital performance-based program.
That sounds great. Thank you, Martinette. I first want to thank Martinette for being the master of ceremony and pulling us all together and giving us an opportunity to chat through the stormwater industry and how we see it evolving, and what really is, we think, a fantastic opportunity for all MS4 permit holders to really start thinking about their programs from an opportunistic perspective, and really, frankly, taking advantage of the compliance piece of their business to open up additional doors of opportunity. So thanks, everyone. Francis, that was great. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us. As we look at speaking with permit holders kind of initially, and they're trying to wrap their heads around, okay, where does this is all great, good ideas, sounds good, kind of how do I get going, right? Where does the rubber hit the road? There's kind of a few things that come to mind as common things that we see that are questions. Really, first and foremost, and I think both Seth touched on it a little bit, and you certainly did too, Francis, and I think Michelle, you covered it in some nice detail, which is this idea of, well, where do we start with the data? There's kind of a general sense that, well, I think 100% of the folks we talk to are like, well, my data is not perfect, right? And it's this idea of perfection versus progress. And so what we often do is we often say, step back and say, well, that's okay. Let's think about it from a risk standpoint, really. Because what you're saying is, if my data is not perfect, it's going to take me more time. It's going to take me additional investment. It's going to take a level of effort to kind of get ourselves there from a data perspective. And instead, what we say is, well, let's talk about what is there really risk in your data today? And let's measure that versus the risk of not doing anything or waiting, versus beginning to move towards essentially kind of this process of creating some centralized harmonization in your data that becomes a foundation for improvement over time. And I know that that's something, Francis, that you guys see all the time in ESRI.
And what we try to say is that let's not let perfect get in the way of better, and really get started, right? I mean, and that, I think, Jason, is a lot of the challenge. We talked to some folks, I think, locally here in Florida, who said, hey, I'm literally going from this paper-based process, and they almost feared the leap. And it's like, hey, let's just get started. Once you get things under management, that starts that process of awareness. And I think there's no shame in getting started, right? I mean, I actually sent a note to my son this morning. It was let me see, it was a bit of a quote from John Kennedy. Every accomplishment starts with the decision to try. Right? So if we think about the accomplishment of getting to digital transformation, it starts with that decision to try and taking that first step. So, and that I think feeds right into the way of, into what you're talking about in this slide is don't be afraid of risk, mitigate it. And sometimes we say the facts are friendly even when they stink, right, Jason? Like, hey, you know what? You've got some messy things out here, but hey, the facts are friendly. We know we now know what we didn't know, so we can actually take some action in a meaningful way instead of being reactive. Sorry for going over, but that reminded me of that quote this morning. Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. No, and I think it's really insightful, and I think it's spot on. In fact, Michelle, I think it's safe to say that 100% of the folks that we talk to, when we initially talk to them, are like, well, I'm not sure if my data is quite there. I mean, that's obviously a normal thing to feel, right? No one's data set. There's no such thing as perfect, really. It's a goal. It's a right, get there. But let's talk about that a little bit, Michelle. How would you recommend if someone's like, well, we don't have all of our assets mapped, or we don't, we've got kind of, a history of, data that's mixed in various formats.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier, like 100% of our customers, regardless of size or level of technology adoption, their data is never going to be perfect or ready. Like I said earlier, I think like technology is always evolving and changing, and you're always going to strive to have better data or collect different information. So that is definitely not a barrier at all. But to get started, I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on where they are in their journey. They can use kind of our second nature, the opportunity maps that I was showing earlier, to identify priority areas within their city on where they want to focus data collection, where they want to improve, how to map their pipes or their outfalls or anything like that. Or they can kind of just systematically move throughout their MS4 and kind of create different sections and how they want to go out into the field and collect data. So there's definitely opportunities, and I think the best option is really just to get started, and we can figure out, the details later. But as long as you have something in GIS, that's better than, just sitting on it.
And you know what? The most interesting thing is, if we think about the very first comment that Jason has made about Keep Tahoe Blue, that's about a goal. Mm-hmm. That's not about a destination, right? So if we think about this as, what is your battle cry? Not unlike Tahoe, we're there to keep Tahoe blue. And anybody who's been to that part of the world, there's reason. There's so much around Tahoe that could, and these guys are continually adapting and applying that science back and bringing that to you. So I thought for a minute, wow, that even Keep Tahoe Blue is more about a vision and an iteration and really a goal that's just out there to, to keep that stormwater fresh and meaningful for Tahoe, right? I mean, sorry.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We were talking to a prospective customer in Florida last week, and they're like, yeah, this is a great story. We really love it. We want to start moving in this direction. And they came to their own realization, really without any help from us at all, that they needed to start moving towards kind of a cloud-based system, a GIS-based system, because what they found is the integrity of their data, as they kind of continued doing things the way that they were, and they were out doing inspections, whether it was routine maintenance or whatever, that the integrity of their data, the quality of their data was declining over time. And they were like, you know what? It's getting a little bit messier every day. We want to start moving it in a different direction. And so their approach was, let's just get the tools in place, even in the field, so that we can start collecting data in a standardized way and putting it into a standardized format, so that we're just incrementally improving the integrity of that data over time, slowly moving the bar, right? Excellent.
Yeah. And over time is going to add to your baseline, right? I mean, when you're out there, again, that move from anything manual into something more digital is always going to transform an organization, because now you have a shared understanding, a shared space, a shared place, and a little bit more of an ease in communication between folks, especially as you go from manual to digital.
Yeah, good point. Well, thank you. We're going to go to the next slide, but while Martinette's switching the slide, I thought maybe I'd mention that we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. I know it's been mentioned a few times, but there will be a little bit of an opportunity to do Q&A here in a couple of minutes. And inside the platform here, there's an area. I'm sure everyone's very familiar in the pandemic with how to use it, but please, we would encourage you to put questions in there. And then Martinette, when she recaps, she'll give you some access to additional resources for how to get in touch and continue the conversation. You know, the interesting thing is, you know, around getting started is we would also suggest that really we consider fitness. And what we mean by that is, you know, as a science-driven organization like ESRI, a science-driven organization, right? That, you know, that there's this idea of make sure you design the answer to fit the question, right? From the beginning. And so from Second Nature's standpoint, I would say that, you know, the stormwater industry has a tremendous opportunity as it embraces the cloud and transitions to GIS, and it really, you know, grabs these technologies to think through, okay, what's the gold standard? How do we really adopt a gold standard of fitness? And I would say that the two pillars really are science and GIS. Rely on those things, because that's what establishes the credibility around talking about, discussing, demonstrating compliance or effectiveness, right? Program performance, program effectiveness. And I think that this is an important topic. We often start by taking a look very specifically at the permit. This happens to be the California permit. We've done the same thing for the Florida permit. And Martinette will show you where you can see that in the Second Nature website. And make sure that you're choosing a set of technologies that don't require massive customization, that don't require really to build it from the ground up.
I was just going to make a comment about, you know, customization of platforms. The other thing, kind of touching on getting started and how people can go about doing that. The great thing about Second Nature and using ESRI is a lot of those products are off the shelf. They're not customized. So getting started using any of those tools is, you know, very, very easy. It's a matter of weeks you'll have full implementation, rather than looking for a customized solution where you're spending months developing requirements and then building the platform, anything like that. So,
and I would follow that only in terms of, you know, ESRI's model today is really configure first, right? The consumerization of IT has taught us one thing, that it is a buy versus build, and a commercial off-the-shelf product with a trusted advisor such as Second Nature, who is applying science to this off-the-shelf solution, is absolutely not only good on the front end, but it actually affords you that maintainability and that trust, because they're supported by and partnered with a 50-year-old leader in this space, and they're accessing and leveraging that. So those who, I think, especially in the state and local government market, that evolution has certainly shown that more commercial off-the-shelf offerings that can be configured and adopted to your specific workflows are much greater than trying to build, maintain, and further, you know, try to take, you know, a lot of the times Jack says, you know, we're already building all this stuff. We're spending 30% of R&D. We're already building all the security models. Just borrow this stuff, you know, use the trusted stuff. And that way you actually are, you know, to our former slide, you're mitigating that risk right up front by that commercial off-the-shelf offering, really.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Maybe we'll go to the last slide so we can start moving towards the Q&A section. And you know, I think this last one, there's lots of different ways to talk about it. You know, this slide is focused kind of on integration and kind of workflows and things like that. Maybe higher level, I think topically about this slide, really from an architecture standpoint, what we're really proposing, Michelle and Francis, I think, is a cloud and GIS based architecture that really is a stormwater program specific architecture. So as I mentioned earlier in the day, the stormwater programs have primarily been consumers of services, information services, workflows of other departments. What we're really talking about when you get down to it is we're talking about actually kind of flipping that around and giving the stormwater program a seat at the IT table to be in control of their own destiny, to have their own architecture that's based upon their requirements, an architecture that not only meets their needs and is effective and has very low risk from an implementation standpoint, but an architecture that can integrate with the rest of their municipality in best of class ways.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really what we're offering here, is the ability to play and stay in your area and focus, but also be able to showcase that value to the system of record that's being established. Or you could be that first person in your organization identifying and starting that journey of that system of record. So that's the goodness about this. And as we talk about that, you know, as we talk about that system, but then we also talk about the system of systems. And when you have an identity and permission-based model, we can start to begin to look at those best practices and share in the cloud without any hesitation of, wow, did I give that to everyone? No, you gave it out to only those who should have access to that data. So it starts local, but it gets, you know, to your city and then your town and that's why we talk about that system of systems and creating that, you know, that greater perspective of where you start and where your vision might go in your stormwater program.
Great point. Great point, Michelle. I know we often very early get into those conversations around integration, right? I've got an existing ESRI investment. We're using GIS. I know you talked about this a little bit in the demo, and obviously there are many other information systems that exist in municipalities of different sizes. Can you talk a little bit just for a second, maybe about kind of that ESRI integration again, kind of that piece of it, and then maybe just touch on integration with other existing information systems?
Yeah. And I think what you're showing here just shows all the different options that we have available between Second Nature and ESRI, depending on, you know, maybe your existing agreement with ESRI or your existing licenses that you have. So the top one here, this is obviously the best idea is that you're using already ESRI's Stormwater Utility Network. And Jason, I think you mentioned in the beginning, but Second Nature and ESRI have worked together to help develop the data model and the data schema that's within the Stormwater Utility Network. So what's really cool about that is if you're already utilizing that, and I believe there's a new Stormwater Utility solution in ArcGIS Online, so you can just start using that package that can feed directly into our data schema and our data model. So you don't have to do any kind of data translation or anything. That's just a very seamless integration. And then we also have other tools where you can do manual imports from ArcGIS Online or from other various data sources. You can set up, you know, bulk imports, anything like that. So it's very flexible in how you're currently using GIS, or if you're just kind of getting started. And then in terms of other data integrations, we have seen, like with other clients, you know, using tools like SAP or Oracle. I think I've heard Primavera before. The great thing about the cloud is, you know, we have APIs where we're able to connect and talk with other systems, and we can work with clients on how we want to push and pull that data, what we want to publish, what we want to do in Second Nature. So it's pretty flexible, and it's all because, you know, we're in the cloud and we're not having to do any customization or anything built on servers.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's a really good point. Well, you know, I think from a presentation standpoint, I think that's a great place to end. We could, of course, continue talking. Michelle, Francis, thank you. Big thank you to Seth as well from NAMSA. There's Martinette, and of course, Martinette, really well done, just fantastic. That was a lot of fun. Why don't we move to kind of Q&A here, and I'll put myself on mute just so you can talk here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. And just as a final thought, again, I did drop this link into the chat box, but you can request a one-on-one demo with Michelle through this link that I'm showing here. And you saw, as Jason mentioned, a example of a permit crosswalk. You can access the permit crosswalk for Florida through this link here. And I will share all the resources with everyone attending today after an email as well. But feel free to reach out to us individually as well with any questions you might have. And with that, I can see we do have a few questions. Let's see. So first question. I have experience managing stormwater programs in 2 different states with different permits. How is your approach different to the different types of permittees? Okay, that might be a Jason question.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, and we can let Michelle chime in as well. So just to make sure I want to do my best to answer that question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but obviously there's variations between the permits, right? Someone who's, a permit in rural Arizona is quite different from a permit in, the Chesapeake Bay over in Maryland or something like that. So there's a great deal of variability in the details. We're, of course, in 11 states. We're not trying to be in every state all at once. We're really looking to work with municipalities as partners to, make your permit come alive in the Second Nature platform. What we're finding today, though, as we scale, is a couple of things. First and foremost, is that the intent of the permits are all similar, right? The Clean Water Act kind of sets the overall framework. States, of course, implement those permits a little bit differently based upon kind of local geography, local location, and things like that. But what we see is permit sections tend to be consistent, and then there's a little bit of variability in terms of how those permit sections get implemented or prescribed, but it's not infinite variability. So we see, from a Second Nature standpoint, now having 100,000 plus assets in the system, things look very similar to us across permit to permit. I think the other thing that I would say is kind of off the shelf, if you will, not to overuse the phrase, but the Second Nature platform now is fairly robust. And so we find that for most permits, we're about at least a 95% fit, meaning that right out the gate that the Second Nature platform can support just about every requirement in the permits that we see across the country. The first step that we actually do is we take local permits, and we've done this for the Phase 2 permit in Florida and a few of the Phase 1 permits, just based on conversations we're having with customers and prospective customers there in Florida. And we map those permit sections directly into the Second Nature platform, as I mentioned. That's a couple of things. One, it's showing kind of that level of fitness, but really it's about reassurance. It's about risk minimization. It's about showing that a decision to enter into a conversation even with Second Nature is based in expertise, and it's based on capability. That we have a lot of expertise in the stormwater world, we have a lot of expertise in the GIS world, and we really do understand the permits in detail and how to bring them to life from a compliance standpoint. I don't know, Michelle or Francis, if you have anything to add to that.
I would just add, Jason, I think you touched on all my main points, but like you said, we're in 11 states. Our customers can vary from very large Phase 1 communities to really small rural Phase 2 communities across the US. So yeah, we see our software being applied everywhere, and yeah, that's all I'll add.
and the pattern that I've seen, and this is very much an ESRI pattern that these guys have adopted, is understanding precedes action. And that fitness to a 95%, the 5% that we're finding isn't, trying to attack the top of Everest, right? We're not in the dead zone. It usually is, is something where it's a fit and finish. And, I think the data speaks very loud, Jason, on the business side, in that we have been able to retain a very high level of customer satisfaction and retention and renewal of the Second Nature platform based on that, overall, hey, we seek to understand, understanding precedes action. These guys have the way I speak is these folks have the skills to pay the bills to get you that 95% and address that 5% and be able to not only see it inside, but also communicate that with your external stakeholders. So I think that's kind of the way I've seen from just an outside partner perspective, seeing that renewal of your customers saying, hey, yeah, that's how you guys are working. So.
No, well said. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we have another question here from Cindy. She asks, I am curious if anyone in Florida has used your software to submit your data to FDEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. What was the experience like? Did the submission go smoothly without a lot of additional requests for data?
Yeah, great question, Cindy. Thank you for asking it. It's kind of multi-part. So the kind of the short and quick answer is no, not yet. We're conducting this mini conference in Florida right now, really, by request. We have enough inbound interest now in Florida that we've said, you know what, it's, there's obviously, for a bunch of reasons, Florida has a tremendous stormwater opportunity. We're investing collectively. Second Nature is investing in Florida. We're bringing ESRI and NAMSA with us in that investment. And we're just now in the kind of the past 2 or 3 weeks really exploring those conversations with prospective customers. So we don't have any existing customers in Florida yet. That's what this conference is really intended to do. But kind of the longer answer is going up to a higher level of Second Nature and with NAMSA and ESRI. We have a fantastic relationship with the EPA. Our relationship is based out of EPA headquarters. We of course have deep relationships with EPA regions across the country. And we have many relationships with state regulators. I would say that the state regulator response to the Second Nature approach has always been outstanding. We really try and embrace e-reporting, as Seth mentioned. We try and embrace data standards. These are the types of things that regulators are looking for. And because our reporting is based upon the peer-reviewed journal published Second Nature science, we tend to really check that credibility box in terms of, is this approach kind of acceptable? And of course, in the states where we do have customers, we have state regulators and permit holders who are willing to and are often testimonials for us as we go into a new state. So we've really trying to bring the best we can to the table as we embrace the Florida market.
Awesome, thank you, Jason. All right, and we have 2 more questions. Not sure if we're going to have time for 2 more, but if we don't, we will follow up offline with anyone who asked a question that we didn't address. Next question is, can you please explain the process my team and I would go through for adoption? How long until we can start using the data for strategic planning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I'll be quiet and let Michelle answer that one.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. So to start adoption of Second Nature platform, I think it varies slightly depending, on the size of your community and how much you have in GIS. But on average, we see about a few weeks of implementation. And what we do at Second Nature is we set up kind of an implementation plan with you and identify the priority areas and what you want to adopt first. And so we really kind of hold your hand, walk you through how to use each tool. We can help you with any data translation that you need to do, with importing information into the platform. But it's really not a huge undertaking. It's a few weeks, and that is because, yeah, again, I don't want to oversay commercial off the shelf, but because we're using that standard data schema, we can implement things very, very quickly. And so you can start to use our strategic planning tools or the reporting tools really as soon as you have your data set in our software.
And you're not alone with Second Nature, and I think that's the biggest part of it, is that as Michelle mentions, that on the front end, we seek to understand where you are, what your goals are, and make sure that there's some training wheels. We get you out of the high-speed wobbles, and then you go. But then behind this, there's a really good, robust community that's being developed by Second Nature, so you have a home to go back to say, hey, I know the product, but what's going on with best practices, and how's that community developing? And to Cindy's question earlier, I think the cool thing about Second Nature is they have some really great published case studies on their website and on ESRI's website that might be able to afford that closing the circle of trust with some of the customers that we all share in some of those areas that might be rural in nature, might be big, but if you are seeking some kind of triangulation on other reference customers, the good news is we both have them and we're both happy to share them, which is good. So guardrails for your success and then triangulation of those patterns are something we can bring to bear for you guys in Florida for sure.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, both of you.
Nice. All right. So Cindy said great answer. Thank you, by the way. And let's go to our last question. I have TMDL requirements in my permit, and our receiving water monitoring program is hundreds of thousands per year. How does the Second Nature platform help me plan and track our program's progress towards meeting our big TMDL requirements?
Oh, that's just a fantastic question. I'm gonna let Michelle go at that one too.
I think that gets a golf clap. I mean, these are the best questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I showed earlier in our demo, when I was in that reporting tool that had the map with the different colored catchments. So what's cool about that is that's our hydrologic model. So going back to that a little bit is we can estimate baseline particulate loads and stormwater volume runoff opportunity. And those models, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but our methodology and how we developed that model has been peer reviewed and published in a few different scientific journals. So that's been kind of vetted with the science community. The reason I'm saying that is that's a method that a lot of our customers are now using to kind of track, at least on the planning kind of scale, where like how much sediment removal we can estimate from their program. And we can model, a few different things, like I showed street sweeping, structural BMPs, anything like that. And the cool thing about the reason we chose to model particulates is we can use that as a proxy for a lot of other urban pollutants that we see, like nutrients or E. coli. I'm sure those are like the two main GMDLs that we see across the US. And so if you get that opportunity map that I showed that has the particulates, that can be a really good proxy for showing areas within your MS4 that might be hotspots for other urban pollutants. And that's really built into our platform. It's not an added fee, it's not an extra consultant cost or anything like that. That's kind of already out of the box, ready for you to use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, and I think with that, we're nearly at time and we don't have any further questions. So I think we're going to wrap it up. I would just like to thank all our presenters today, Michelle, Jason, Francis, and Seth. Super job. Thank you so much for sharing with the community in Florida. And please reach out to us. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a real pleasure being able to present this information to you. We appreciate your time. And yeah, from our living rooms or home offices or kitchens to wherever you might be dialing in from today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for that. Thanks, Francis, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. Make it a great day. Bye now.
Bye.